Welcome everybody to the show. We are Halloween Heads. I'm Mark. I'm here with my longtime friend Shannon, and we're here to discuss everything and anything Halloween. So I hope you Halloween fans sit back and enjoy this. We've got a lot to talk about today. This is our first episode, so the thing that we kind of wanted to focus on, everybody's done reviews of the films. You've got the remake, you've got the reboot, you got the original, the John Carpenter film. And so we decided, because there's so much out there, why don't we discuss Halloween timelines? So we'll look at the timelines and we'll see how they kind of mix and match. And, even the possibility of, a possible Halloween multiverse, that's a possibility too, with so many timelines and even other horror characters from different franchises. So that's kind of where we're going today.
Well, another thing too, since this is the first episode, I think we should take a little bit of a step back and give maybe even a little bit of our history too, being that we came from the podcasting world back in the olden days, and some of you might recognize our voices from those two dumbasses from the Horror Heads podcast.
Yeah.
I don't even remember, when did we end that? We ended that in early 2021, I believe, is when we ended that. Yeah, okay. Something like that. But yeah, and the very first episode of Horror Heads, we decided that we were going to cover all of the franchise movies in the Halloween franchise, or all the movies in the franchise, should say. And at that time, it was 11 movies or something, I want to say.
Yeah, I don't think because we didn't get to 18 yet. So it was whatever it ended at Halloween 2, Rob Zombie.
Yeah. So it ended up being like a 2-hour episode. And so then this time for our first episode, we were like, hey, let's talk about the timeline. So hopefully this doesn't end up being a 2-hour debacle of us just rambling the entire time.
It very well may be. And, and that's another thing we should let you all know, as if any of you remember us from Horror Heads, our previous podcast, our shtick was, hey, we're going to hang out, we're going to talk about horror movies, and we're not necessarily going to give you all the facts and all the information that you already could find on Wikipedia. We're just going to talk about it just like if we were back in the schoolyard, chatting about the latest horror movie we saw, which is kind of how we did it when we began.
So let me ask you this. When you think of the various Halloween timelines and you count them on the top of you, just off the top of your head, how many different timelines do you come up with?
Oh gosh, well, let's see. There's the original timeline, which is 1 through 6, right? And then you've got the timeline of Halloween through Halloween Resurrection, which is when H2O changed everything, so that's 2. Then you've got the zombie Halloween, the remake, so that's 3. I guess you got to put Halloween 3 in there somewhere, so that's on its own, so that would be 4. And then you've got the what is it? You've got the reboot, the Blumhouse reboot, which would connect back to 1. So that I would say about 5, right? We're looking at.
Yep, that's the same number I come up with too, is 5. So I come up with what you said, the very first one. So you have 78, part 2, part 4, part 5, part 6, then 78, part 2, H2O Resurrection, Zombies series, and then 78, 2018 Kills, and then Ends, I guess. And then I guess 3 is just like a standalone one, I guess.
3 is on its own. It's doing its own thing.
And the 3 is a weird one too, because then what's funny with 3, that almost touches on like the meta verse or even the multiverse in its own right, because there is an ad for the original Halloween movie in Halloween 3, which is kind of funny.
That is funny. I remember actually the first time I saw 3, I don't know, do you remember the first time you saw 3? Were you surprised by, Oh, Michael's not in this one.
I don't think so. I probably saw three before I saw anything else, honestly, because I probably saw three with you because you probably like, you guys gotta check this out.
Yeah, because like three, I saw the first one first, and I saw that when I was really little, like 5 years old was my first time seeing Halloween. I was, this movie's great, just grew up watching it. And then I saw the second one, and I remember it was like on Channel 9 in Chicago. They did a one week it was Halloween 2, and the other week it was Halloween 3, and I had not seen either one at the time, and I was desperate to see them. Saw part 2, loved it, thought it was great. And I remember part 3 being told by a kid in the neighborhood that, oh, this has nothing to do with Michael Myers. Now he didn't see it either. So what he told me it was about, and I always thought this was really cool, and it wasn't true, obviously, was he said it was about Judith Myers coming back from the dead with a knife in her heart. And because of that, I was like, oh, that's okay. So I didn't know what to expect with Halloween 3, but then watched Halloween 3 way back, and this must have been like 86 or 87. And after I watched it that one time, and I recorded it on beta, never cared to ever revisit it or watch it again. It was like, yeah, okay, I saw that, and there's no Michael Myers, so that did not interest me at all.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't. It's just one of those things that it's one of those movies that's just always kind of been there. So I have no idea when the first time I saw it was. I think I can't. I mean, there's a lot. That's a lot. Kind of it over time it's sort of melded in with a lot of these classic horror movies. When you're talking about all these 80s and 70s slashers and stuff. I honestly anymore I can't honestly definitively say like, oh yeah, I remember watching this for the first time or that for the first time when I was like a kid. Just so anymore, it's just all melded together in my middle-aged man brain.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Yeah, I mean the first one's the one that really sticks out to me. Gosh, I was so little when I saw it, and then I saw it. I remember a time, one of my first viewings, it was on TV, and it was like it must have been like Halloween night, and my grandma was over, and we're all sitting around the TV watching it, and I just was so into it. But yeah, like so part 3 was like really the first step away from this timeline like we're talking about. I mean, 3 was, and very meta too, which is kind of cool when you think about it. Like they're watching, like you said, like the Halloween trailer, and then they put Tom Atkins, strap him into the chair, and he's forced to watch Halloween, which is kind of weird. It's like, this is all before Scream and everything like that. So yeah, to me that Halloween 3, like I like it for what it is, but I wouldn't call it a great movie at all. And its departure from what we were used to was just too much for me. I was not into that. So that timeline to me, you could take Halloween 3, set it aside, and I guess I'm glad that there's no sequels to it. I don't think there needs to be. I think that timeline does fine just by itself as that one-time movie.
So yeah, and not to get sidetracked because we could totally get sidetracked on that. So I'll try to keep us in line on the timeline thing here. So I kind of know well, actually I don't know necessarily the answer to this because we're sticking with the timeline in here. So we don't want to delve into like our favorite movie in particular. So keeping the original out of the equation, because I would say the original is the greatest, at least in our opinions. I mean, that's not a surprise to either one of us anyway, that we both think that that is the best one. So taking, 78 Halloween out of the mix, what is your favorite timeline in your opinion?
Okay, so I was thinking about this quite a bit, and see, this is where it gets kind of weird because I have to sort of edit the timelines a bit. I have to take. I can't I can't look at the timeline and say I totally for perfect example. Okay, so for a long time prior to the remakes and the reboots and all that, the timeline to me, the one that was like my favorite, and I was like, okay, this is Halloween. These are the movies. It was Halloween 78, Halloween 2, and H2O. And it was, to me, it was a trilogy. It was like it wrapped it up perfectly. Jamie came back for the third film, kills him, it's over. But then all of a sudden we get Resurrection, and then that timeline is completely contaminated now because it's like one of the worst movies. So I can't use that timeline anymore. And I just can't. I can't put, if we had to go technically speaking, you have to put Resurrection in there, right? You have to add that one.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if this is cheating or not, but to me, the timeline, the one that I think is the most effective and the best, is Halloween 78 by itself. Begins and ends with that movie.
Okay. Which is kind of funny because that takes that goes against the one rule that I put out for the
So yeah, I see, and I wanted to go with the
and I see what you're saying though, because and I think again this is our first episode, and I think that's a good introduction to the two of us, especially to you, because that's always been your opinion is, and that's one thing that I think is going to be an interesting dynamic to this show is this show is going to be everything Halloween. So we're talking the entire Halloween universe. And Mark is very, very, very much Halloween happened in 1978 in this one movie. And everybody will see this as time goes on. He will get very, very excited for new Halloween stuff, and it will be the greatest thing ever until 5 minutes after it's over, and then all of the excitement kind of
yeah
out.
no yeah I like this last one 18. Man, I was so excited about this film. I mean, I was like off the charts excited when I found out Nick Castle was in it, and then they completely lied to us. They made it sound like he was playing Michael Myers again, and even he was on I love Nick Castle to death. I think he seems like a great guy when you see him in interviews, but that whole build up to Halloween 18, all the promos and stuff, he's like talking about how he's back, and Sean Clark's talking about how he's back, and there's all this story of how the studio contacted him to play it again. Oh, and they're getting a stunt guy too named James I can't say his name.
James Jude Courtney.
James Jude Courtney. And it made it sound like he was just going to do like a few stunts here and there, and it was going to be Nick the whole thing, just like the original.
Right.
So I was like full on board, and then I saw that movie, and it was just huge disappointment. I didn't want to believe it at first, but it really was.
Yeah, I just I remember that. And it's the same thing when Kills came out, or leading up to Kills, you're getting all excited again, like, oh, it's gonna be great. And then or when Kills came out, and then we went and saw it, and then and I think we both had the same equal level excitement coming out of it, like that was great. And then over time, you're just kind of like, it's not so good. And I'm still like, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, I'm gonna go with, I would say my actually, and I'm gonna think about this, taking the 78 version out of the mix.
Wait, now when you say you're taking the 78 version out of the mix,
I'm just saying, like, I'm not keeping the awesomeness of Halloween 78 when I'm thinking of that entire timeline.
Okay.
Because that one is the beginning for all of them, really.
Okay.
So like you said, which is your answer pretty much is what I was expecting was, well, I don't like any of the timeline outside of the original movie enough to enjoy any of that without the movie. So I don't like any of them. But I would say that I would have to go with kind of what your original thing, what you were talking about was, and like an edited version of a timeline, which again, this kind of goes with what our attitude has always been, back in the old horror heads days, and that is, and this is kind of goes with my thought when it comes to like what makes a certain movie a holiday movie, like, oh, is Die Hard a Christmas movie or not? But the same thing with this, and it's, if what you think is the perfect timeline in your brain, then great. That's the most best, that's the perfect timeline for you. Then so be it. I mean, it's 2022. The Halloween Nazis are gonna come over to your house because you're not watching all the movies on a certain timeline or something.
Yeah.
But so if yours would be like the original part two and then H2O, I would have to say mine would be the original 1978, then Halloween 2, and then because I am a huge Daniel Harris fan, I would have to throw part 4 into the mix. And because part 5 is such a bad movie that I can't really stomach it anymore. Like I can stand it every once in a great while, like parts of it, but I can't really do the whole thing. But I still have love for Halloween 6 for whatever reason. So I would have to say the original timeline minus part 5 if I could get away with that.
Yeah, I see that. No, and it's funny because when we were kids, I accepted 4, 5, and even 6 as just that's what it is. I don't, how you like when you're younger, when you're a kid, you kind of you whatever they give you, you take. Okay, well that's Halloween, and like and I even back then I always thought the original was far superior to anything that came out, but that Thorn trilogy, in which that timeline, that whole thing, that's where back then, that's where we thought it was going to keep going, because each one was sort of taking to the next thing, right? 1, 2, then 4 follows up right after 2, then 5 is like the next day practically, and then and 6 follows up with 5 with the Man in Black. So that timeline, that's kind of like the classic timeline right there, ending at 6. And it took a while for 6 to come out, because that was like what,
95.
95,
Right.
yeah. And then and part 5 was like what, like 89 or something, probably 89.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was a long time. I remember, and kind of like you, like 6 to me, 6 was my first theatrical viewing of a Halloween movie, and I saw it like, I must have seen that thing like 10 times in the theater, just because it was Michael Myers and it was in a theater. But yeah, that timeline, that whole Thorn thing, that really was, I, you knew it was getting kind of convoluted, and even as a kid, you think like the Man in Black thing was kind of weird, but yeah, I mean, I kind of accept that as like almost like a classic timeline. But now going back in my 40s, I don't revisit those films.
Right. Yeah. Then that's exactly what I was getting at too, because I mean, it's with everything. Um, you know, we were at, when at my work, we were having a meeting one time, and I think it was like before Christmas, and we were talking like, oh, it was before Christmas break, and we were all talking about what movies everybody watches every year as a tradition, because I brought it up because that's a thing that we always talk about, is like, hey, what movies you watching like this Halloween season, or this Christmas season or whatever. And so a couple of the people were talking about like, oh, I watched this movie or I watched this movie, and one of the women on my team said, and I don't remember what movie she said, but she said, oh, this might be kind of weird, but every year me and my sister watch this movie at Christmas. And I don't remember what the movie was, and I was like, oh, that's not weird at all. And they were like, what do you mean it's not weird? That's not a Christmas movie at all. I'm like, well, if you guys watch it at Christmas, it's a Christmas movie to you. So obviously it's a Christmas movie to you guys. So it's fine.
Right.
I mean, but yeah, it's the same thing with this. If I'm in the mood to watch, you know, the Thorn movies, I'll watch part 4, and I'm not going to really watch part 5. Maybe if I could find like a part 5 that was hosted by Joe Bob or something that
Yeah,
had the Joe Bob clips in there, I would maybe watch that. But and then if I was going to watch part 6, I'd have to watch the producer's cut for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I did like the producer's cut a lot better. It seemed like a more uh, a complete film, whereas that theatrical, that ending, and all that stuff is just so weird and loose, and you don't know what happens. And yeah, just so bizarre that they even released that like that.
Right. So here's another question I want to ask you in regards to the different timelines. Um, so in the various Jamie, the various Laurie Strode timelines, minus the Rob Zombie movies, uh, there are, there's 3 different timelines, and there are 3 different children. So we have Jamie Lloyd, what was his name? John Tate, I think,
Oh
something
yeah,
like that.
yeah,
And then Karen Nelson, right? In
right.
2018 and Halloween Kills. So it's 3 different kids, but technically they all came from Laurie Strode, who was in Halloween 1978. So do you think those 3 kids have the same father, even though they all have 3 different last names, which I would assume that would maybe give it away that that's their, I don't know if that's their dad's last name or not, but that's something I wonder too, like, And
Yeah,
the other thing I wonder is because if you actually look at their ages, I mean, if you look at the actors' ages who play those characters, they are they all are differently. I think they like one is like 70 was born like in 79, one was born like in 78, and one was born in 77 or something.
hmm.
So technically they could be like siblings, even though they would one of them would have had been born before the events of the original movie, which would have been, funny.
Yeah,
That which actually in the Halloween timeline wouldn't be a thing out of the stretch of the imagination.
not at
Oh,
all.
it turns out that Karen was in the closet in 1978 this whole time.
Could be, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Well, isn't now I could be wrong about this, but I always thought that the Danielle Harris character, Jamie, was supposed to be the daughter of Jimmy, the ambulance driver from part 2.
Was she?
I could be wrong. I don't know why I'm in my head. I'm thinking like
I
they
mean, I don't think they ever said who the dad was, but
okay. Yeah, I thought like you kind of are supposed to get the impression that those two got together somehow, and then
maybe.
and that's where it. Then part 4 picks up, and she supposedly died in the ambulance or the car accident or whatever, which is
Right.
weird. Yeah, that was kind of weird too. Yeah, and then the kid played by Josh Hartnett, was that his name from
Uh,
H2O?
yeah, I don't remember. Yeah, the whole
WB kid.
right. Yep.
Yeah, so he was maybe he was supposed to be Jimmy's kid. I don't know. Yeah, I don't remember. I can't even put that together of who was who with that. But yeah, yeah, I wonder that it's interesting that you would think you would see that. Like you think like, okay, are they supposedly having the same dad? Because I know what's her name, Jamie or Danielle Harris keeps saying she wants to come back in these reboots and play like a daughter type figure, which you know, we were talking, in the intro of the show, I kind of I brought up the idea that you and I have been talking about the idea of a multiverse,
Right.
which that could actually be kind of a cool segue into that by introducing Danielle Harris into like Halloween Ends as the, you know, whatever, she could be Laurie's daughter from that different unit with a Thorn universe, or she could, we could even go crazier and say, well, she would be Annie if she was coming from Zombies universe. But anyhow,
Oh, that would even be wild. Yeah, how would that's even yeah. Do you have was there any other crossover characters besides her that were in both franchises?
I don't think so. Oh, you mean in terms of the actual? Oh yeah,
Actually,
yes. Yeah. Here's another crossover who actually died twice, differently, in different movies. Was the nurse in the original film Marion Chambers, I think is her name. She's with Loomis, and they go pick up Michael, and that's when Michael escapes the first movie. Then she's in the second movie, and she reveals that Laurie and Michael are brother and sister. Then she is in H2, no, yeah, H2O in the beginning, and she returns and she gets killed in the house when Michael's in there looking for the file to find Laurie. And then so she dies in that scene. And then in Halloween Kills, she dies in the car scene because she's like, it's her, Lindsay and Tommy that like supposedly now all hang out together at a bar.
Yeah, but she wasn't in either. But the actress wasn't in Carpenter's universe and Zombies universe, though.
No. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that's what I was saying.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Besides, yeah, I think the only one was Daniel Harris, right? Yeah, that was in both.
Yeah,
Yeah,
can't think of
because
any.
that would even make it the multiverse even more goofy if you're going not only like characters, but then actors too that
Yeah,
were in like different. Oh man, then you're talking because not only yeah, so then not only do you have different technically you have different Lorries because they went in different directions, and then she had the different kids, but then you have different Loomises, and
yeah. There's like different versions of Laurie Strode. I mean, there's obviously Zombies Laurie and then Carpenter's Laurie, but then Carpenter's Laurie, like you said, veers off in different directions, different timelines. So yeah, it's
yeah,
a bit
and,
convoluted.
and I always wondered in the original timeline, in the I guess what we would refer to now as I guess what is that one? That one I guess is the Thorn timeline. I guess ultimately, right?
I think you have to say that, right? The up to
Yeah.
six. Yeah, that was.
Yeah, and then the second one I would refer to, I guess, is the H2O timeline.
Yep, up into through resurrection.
Yeah, and then I guess now I don't know what we'd call the current one, but
Well, we would call well, then we get the remakes with the zombie remakes. The current one is kind of like a reboot. So
yeah,
the Blumhouse reboot is what I call it.
yeah, that works.
But which is kind of weird because when you think of those movies, you really think of a trilogy. I don't, it's like you forget, oh yeah, the first one is actually the first movie. But when you think of like the Blumhouse films, you're thinking like 18 kills and ends. So yeah, it's really bizarre. And then who knows where we're gonna go after that.
Yeah, I wondered. Yeah, that's why I wonder now because it seems that everything always goes in trends and in waves and stuff, and it seems like this whole multiverse thing is really starting to take off.
Yeah.
I know that it's really taken off in the comic book in the superhero movie world. And then I was at where was I at? Was I at Target or is it Walmart or something the other day, like Saturday or something, just like looking through the toy section, and I noticed like there was now granted they might have all been like Disney related or Disney owned like properties, I think, but I saw like this whole like multiverse, um mirrorverse, what was the other one, macroverse or something. I keep seeing like they keep saying that this different iterations of this same phrase. They're trying to push this thing on us right now, and it seems like it's going to be everywhere before too awful long
Oh
because
yeah.
Spider-Man just did it, and I think isn't which I know it's related to it, but Doctor Strange I think is still continuing to do it, or I think in another movie that's coming out before too awful long, and then aren't they doing something to Disney's doing like a bunch of stuff like on the Disney Plus channel with the multiverse stuff. So I'm sure it's going to be everywhere before
Yeah.
too awful long.
Oh
So
sure. I probably.
because
Yeah,
I
it's
think the whole what was it, the requel, which which Halloween was part of, I think that whole thing is sort of, I think it kind of petered out a little bit, you know. Like it went pretty hard there, and I think it started to slow down. So I think they went, okay, let's put the brakes on that for now, and let's jump over here and do something else.
Wait, which part are you talking about that they put the?
The whole requel thing. So you had like Ghostbusters and all like Star
Oh,
Wars and all of that stuff. So I
like
think
where you basically take the same format and make a new movie using it.
right,
Okay,
right,
got it. Yeah, and now it seems like yeah, like Force Awakens is A New Hope, that kind of thing. And then obviously Halloween 18 is pretty much Halloween 78. Just
yep,
but yeah, so yeah, I think you're right. I think the multiverse thing is the next thing.
yep.
I guess this wouldn't be necessarily multiverse, but in terms of a universe, this is kind of something that I know we talked about back in the old podcast was originally, and this never really came to fruition, was the Universal Monsters were going to have their own universe, where all those characters were all in the same universe. Was what was that? Dark something. Remember that?
Oh yeah, yeah. Dark wasn't it just Dark Universe or
Dark
something?
Universe, yeah, something like that. And they were going to do that where you got Frankenstein, the Wolfman, and the Mummy, and all of those things. And I think it was what wasn't it like that horrible Tom Cruise The Mummy movie was like one of the first ones they did, and then it just
Hmm.
bombed, and they realized this isn't going to work. So that was that so they were creating that universe for that, and which is one thing I was kind of curious about what your thoughts were like with Halloween. Obviously there's the multiverse where you're going to connect. You could take these timelines and throw a different Michael in, like put two Michael Myers in one movie or whatever. But also the idea of creating a universe with all the contemporary slashers. Like originally, I think didn't back when back in the early 2000s when the remakes were just exploding. I wasn't what was Platinum, was it Platinum Dunes? I can't
Hmm.
remember these names. Platinum
Yep.
Dunes, didn't they do Chainsaw? And didn't
Yep.
they also do either Friday or Nightmare? One of the two.
Yeah. Or didn't they? Maybe they had their hands in both of them or something.
Maybe they did. Maybe they had all three, which would have been like, if they had all three of those, then they could have connected all those franchises into one universe, kind of going with a modern, like dark universe kind of thing instead of the Frankenstein monsters, do the slashers, put Michael.
Right.
And I know we've talked about in the past how cool it would be to see like an updated version of Monster Squad with, instead of Frankenstein and Dracula, have like Michael Myers and Jason, in that same universe.
Yeah, it would be cool. The only problem I think you would run into now is, well, actually, now that I say that, now that we're in the the world that we are in now, I think up until this point now, it would have been really hard to do that because you have so many fans that are loyal to the characters, especially Freddy Krueger and Robert England, that it would be hard to get. Well, look at the remake from what was that, 2009.
Yeah,
The just the backlash of having somebody other than Robert England play
that's true.
Freddy, which is, and you kind of even get that too a little bit with Jason and Kane Hodder a little bit. It's not nearly as bad as the Robert England backlash.
Yeah,
You know, but the nice thing is now well, we have the technology now in 2022 that you can do uh like deep fake crap anymore,
that's
that you could have like
true.
these characters and they could look exactly perfect how you want them to look. They could
Yeah,
look exactly like that's Michael Myers from 1978, and that's Freddy Krueger from 1984, and that's Jason from whatever year you want him to be from, and they could just look perfect.
yeah,
And then, and you could have the voices be perfect and everything be perfect. And it would be great, I
that
think,
was cool. Yeah,
you
you're
know,
right. They could really bring Freddie, like Robert England's Freddie, back to life without even Robert England nowadays. Which,
right.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's really cool. Yeah, so I was just kind of thinking about that, how, like I totally forgot about that dark universe thing and how that was supposed to turn into this, everybody's trying to copy the success of Marvel. But even going back to Marvel, Marvel being originally a comic book thing, and you've got all these characters that were in comic books and they all have these different storylines. Like I think of these Halloween timelines, in my opinion, I was kind of wanting to throw this out to you. I really see them as like if and probably I don't, I'm not too familiar with the comics for Halloween. I never really read any of them, but I'm, obviously with comic books, they're going to have like different, excuse me, they're going to have different um, timelines, and they're going to have timelines that don't connect to other timelines. And the way that movies are nowadays with these franchises is pretty much to me like how I would assume or I imagine the comics are.
Oh yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, I never I don't think I ever really read the comics either. But what's funny is you bring up the comics and then you bring up like these like distorted timelines and stuff. Look at what DC's doing with, well, hell, look at like what they're doing with just the Batman in general. I mean,
Yeah.
just Batman. I saw an article today that said that in 2022 alone, there is going to be 4 different versions of the Batman on film
Wow.
for 2022. And so you have the Batman that's coming out, and then there's like the Flash movie that's coming out, I guess, that has Michael Keaton's character in it, and then or Michael Keaton's Batman in it. And then so that's 2 different versions. I don't know what the other, I didn't actually read the whole thing. So I'm assuming probably 2 animated movies maybe as well.
Well, I wasn't Affleck's Batman somehow involved in that Flash movie too. I could be wrong, but
Oh, okay. Possibly.
I think
Then
he's
that
part of
would
it.
that would be 3 then. Yeah.
And you know what's funny too is like I was actually just talking to my son about this with the Batman movies. I'm not a huge fan of any of them. I think like the Dark Knight trilogy is good, and there's there's a few I like better than others. Not a big fan of the Tim Burton ones. I like the second one, believe it or not, better than the first one. But at the same time as I say that, the idea of and the Flash, I could care less about. I know nothing about that character. But at the same time that I say that, the idea of Michael Keaton being in the Flash, oh yeah, I'm gonna go see it. Absolutely. I don't know why. I just like the idea of him coming back is like, yeah, I got to see it definitely. And that was kind of the same thing with Spider-Man. Like when my kids were young, I took them to the Tobey Maguire films. I really enjoyed them. And we even saw the Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2, and that seemed a little redundant. I mean, I liked them, but they were a little redundant. It seemed a little too soon to be starting all over. But then those Tom Holland films, I just could care less. Had no interest in it. I think we rented one on Prime once, and I sat through part of it, and I walked away. I was like, yeah, I don't want to watch this. It's just not my thing. And then when I heard that they're bringing back especially Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, I was like, I got to go see it. And then I went and saw it. Yeah, absolutely brilliant movie. And they did a really good job with how they did it. But I think it's like how emotionally connected you are with some of these characters. Like, I can picture. I can again kind of talking about like Halloween. Bringing Laurie back. People want to go see her like in a new timeline. Even everybody's ready to go see. Like you put Jamie Lee Curtis in that role, and that the movie does great. The box office is crazy. So I think there's like a lot of that emotional connection we have to like these old actors who portrayed these characters for so long.
Right. Yeah. Well, some of us more than others, but yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I can see like with like again like with this with the idea of like what's his name Michael Keaton being in that role again, even though I wasn't really a fan of those movies. Like I never watched them, and I remember seeing the first one and walking out of the theater like, yeah, it's all right. But the idea that like because I remember where I was at the time, and I remember how big a event it was that he was going to be Batman, how weird it was at the time. Because I remember at the time, all I knew of him as was Mr. Mom. And I'm like, that guy's going to be Batman? Strange. And then, you see it, and it just kind of, he fit the character well. And so the idea that he's coming back, it's like, oh yeah, definitely, I got to see that. I got to see. And I saw that trailer where they show they're in his bat cave, and you see the back of his cowl and the ears, and it's like you could tell it's the Keaton costume. And I was like, oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think I'll be sitting that one out.
So speaking of, for me at least, sitting it out, we didn't really touch much on the zombie remake timeline, which was supposed to go beyond just two. There were like plans for a third movie. I don't think zombie was part of it, but they were going to do a trilogy with that, and that was actually with the guy who wrote the My Bloody Valentine remake, and the guy directed that as well, I believe. Those two, there's like Todd Farmer, and I can't think of the director's name, but and they were going to follow up, right where H2 left off, and carry on that storyline, and then eventually that got tossed away. But what are your thoughts of that timeline? Because that's sort of a controversial one for a lot of us Halloween fans.
I like the zombie timeline quite well. I shouldn't say quite a bit, but I do like it. And I know that a lot of the anger and hatred for zombie movies comes from his decision to give all of the backstory that he gives in his original, or in the 2007 version, and gives Michael more of a substance than being just the shape, which I think angered a lot of people.
Right.
And then I know in like part two, I think what in your part two, your biggest complaint is you see Michael more than you should. Isn't that your biggest complaint?
Oh gosh, I have a lot of complaints on
Well,
H2.
but yeah, but I mean, you actually want to be actually seeing him without the mask is
Yeah,
like a
that
big
was
complaint.
a huge complaint. His appearance from yes, absolutely, the whole, what they call him, the hobo Michael. I just no, and I think we've talked about this a lot in our old podcast about how my opinion is that our monsters have to look good. You have to get some certain things, and that's one of my biggest complaints about all of these Halloween movies is the mask. We've talked about that a lot in the past. If that mask does not look good, if he does not look good wearing it, and if he does not move and the way I think Michael should move, I've already written that movie off as it's not going to work. And it's funny because Rob Zombie's original Halloween, I thought was it Taylor Maine?
Mm-hmm.
I thought he did an incredible job as Michael. I actually thought he was like probably the best since Nick Castle, or maybe Dick Warlock, because he lost a whole bunch of weight, and if you look at the first movie, Nick Castle was like a toothpick in that film, and so he looked really trim. He was really tall, and that wasn't a big fan of that. But when he had the mask on, and the mask actually looked pretty decent, it looked like you could tell that was Michael Myers, and even with some of the wear and tear on it, I thought it was pretty good. But then they go with Halloween 2, and he did gain a bit more weight because he wasn't on that same diet as he was the first time. But like, yeah, half the mask, and he's got a beard hanging out, and he looks like he's been, he was sleeping in a cornfield for months or whatever, days, and it just
Right.
not work for me.
Yeah, but that timeline, I do. It's weird, and I don't know when the last. Have you ever even seen Halloween 2 since me and you saw it in the theater?
Not all the way. It's been on like AMC Fear Fest, and I'll watch a snippet of it here and there, but no, I have not seen it all the way through. So that's how long ago it was.
Yeah, because I was gonna say, because that's one of those movies too where I know that it, like, you, at least with me, like I do enjoy it, but I have to be like in a certain mood to be able to watch it. So,
Hmm.
but because otherwise, like, if you're not, for me, if I'm not in the right mood to watch it, I'll watch it and then I'll be like, ugh, this is shit. And then I'll turn it off. But if I'm like in the right mood to watch it, then I'll be like, all right, this is all right. I can make it through it.
Yeah, a lot of people love it, and they say that it's like, like where he got a lot of shit for Halloween 1 because he copied a lot of Carpenter stuff. Like, that second half of the movie is like just a retelling of the Carpenter film. But the second one, he kind of did his own thing and added his own elements to it. But to me, everything he did just did not scream Halloween to me. So that's why I just can't watch it. It just doesn't. But and funny enough, though, the weird thing about this Halloween zombie reboot. Now, when this was first announced, this was back in the MySpace days, because I remember digging around on. I must have been Zombies MySpace, and he had all this. He was like kind of teasing all the actors that were going to be in it, and he's throwing out all these names like D. Wallace Stone and the guy from or whoever the guy is that plays Loomis. I can't think of his name. And I was really excited about that. I was like, oh, it is kind of cool, like a remake of Halloween. And I was a little hesitant about the zombie thing with him being attached to it, but I was like, yeah, I could see this happening. And I was really like kind of getting into the hype. And then when they or when it was released, I went into the theater, and I actually, when I saw it, I walked out of the theater and I was like, that was pretty good, and it was like, yeah, and I didn't really care for the first parts, the stuff when with Michael as a kid and all that, but the second half, it's like, yeah, that was really cool. And then I remember when it was released on DVD, I was waiting to go pick it up, and I was going to go run out to the store and pick it up, and it came out, and I went to the Family Video at the time, and they had it for sale and to rent. And I walked in there, and I picked it up, and I looked at it, and I see this picture of Michael Myers with this really long hair, and I'm like, maybe I should rent it first before I, spend the $20. So I rented it, and I watched it again, and I was, oh, this is terrible. And then I realized in my head, the reason I liked it so much in the theater was because that was the first time I saw some of those Carpenter scenes in a theater. I mean, they were the redone version, but like seeing Bob get stabbed to the wall, and him stalking the three girls in the neighborhood, and all that was so cool, because it was like, I didn't see that the first time around. I hadn't seen it in the theater at the original at that time. But then going now I just can't, like, I'm just not into it. I can't do it.
Which is hilarious, but which is so funny. But it goes back to exactly what I was talking about earlier, with exactly when I asked what were your favorite timeline minus the original movie, because
Yeah, yeah. So, basically, I think going back to what we were talking about, we brought up that, um, we're talking about our favorite timelines, and we both say the first one. What that obviously the first movie we enjoy the most, and if I was to break it down, I'd have to say the first one ends perfectly, where he's gone and he disappears, and we never see him again. I do like part two. I do. Part two to me is like kind of a guilty pleasure. You watch that movie now and you're like, it's not a very good movie, but it has some really cool scenes in it, that kind of reminds you of the first one. And I think we talked about this in the past too, in our old podcast, how to me, Halloween 2 is like the Jaws 2. Like, you're not going to get nearly the quality of the first film, and you've already seen it, but hey, you loved it so much. Here's a little bit more of it. And that, to me, I kind of wrap things up at part two. So my timeline used to be, I kind of threw H2O in there and tried to push Resurrection out. But I guess I would say to be honest with you, going to, I'm going to have to say I enjoy 1 and 2, and that's kind of where I wrap it up. But ultimately, I think 1 alone is all you needed.
Yeah, I would have to agree, right? Yeah. I think that's what I've said that, and I've always been more of a fan of the franchise than you have been, because I've always given the other ones a lot more of a try than you have. Um, but I agree also too that yeah, it should end with one. I mean, the sequels are fun and stuff. They're not, the other franchise sequels at all. They're not nearly as fun as Nightmare on Elm Street or Friday the 13th. They don't even come close to the Friday the 13th movies at all. Whereas, some of these are outside of, the 1978 version anymore. It really comes down to like, oh, in the mood for a Halloween movie, 15, 20 years ago, I would have maybe thrown in 4 or 5 or 3 or something. But now it's like, oh, I'm in the mood. Maybe I'll just watch Halloween. And if that's not it, then
Yeah.
it's like when we went and saw 2018 in the theaters. I think I saw it twice in the theaters, and I think that's the last time I saw it. And then the same thing with Halloween Kills. I think I saw it twice in the theaters. And then I watched like that opening scene when it like a couple of times, the flashback scene. But other than that, I haven't seen it. Not that I didn't hate it or anything. I just like, I'm not gonna, I could do other stuff with my time than watch this subpar Halloween movie again, And
Yeah.
the same will probably happen with Ends this year. We'll probably go see it, and whether I like it or not, that will probably be the last time I ever see it is in a theater.
I'm sure it will be for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny because it seemed like you were. Do you see it? It seems like it may have reversed a little bit, where you were incredibly open to the sequels for a while, and like especially the zombie films, and then like after 18, I noticed something shifted in you though. Like to me, like as soon I know for a fact that once Ends comes out in the theater, I got to go see it in the theater. I didn't like 18 very much. Kills was like subpar, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
but I still got to see Ends. And I could almost sense when the time comes, it may take a little pushing you to get you to want to go see that in the theater.
Oh, probably, yeah.
So, and it seems like I guess maybe because of the Blumhouse thing, I bought into all the hype early on, so I kind of still running on that excitement train with this. But I shouldn't be. I should be like completely disappointed with and I should just blow off Ends altogether. But there's no way I'm going to do that. But so yeah, we'll have to see that and then see what the next timeline is. But we should probably go ahead and start wrapping the show up.
Do it, man.
I hope you all enjoyed it. Again, give us a comment below. Let us know what you think, and anything you feel you'd like to hear us talk about. I mean, we're going to get to a lot. There's a lot to talk about. The characters who play or the actors who play the shape. We're going to do things. We'll talk about like maybe unproduced scripts. All kinds of the masks. Of course, we'll get to the masks eventually as well. But thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you all later.